Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Off-Farm Income Podcast. Hey, have you found our YouTube channel? Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being here for episode number 745. I hope 2020 is off to a great start for you. You're probably back to work after the holiday. Man, here we are, a whole brand new year. Well, let's kick this year off, our back-to-work week schedule, with a great interview with a young man from the FFA from Oregon. Keegan Gibbs is going to join us. He's going to talk to us about being both a chapter president and then a state treasurer for the state of Oregon. Right now, he is over in Europe through the FFA. Fascinating stuff. As you listen to this, he's either in Portugal or in Spain, going through New York City on New Year's Eve. Really, really fun stuff to talk about, and we'll get that started for you right now. Joining us today is Keegan Gibbs, and he is coming to us from Heppner, Oregon, and he's currently serving as a state FFA officer for the state of Oregon after finishing up his high school career at Heppner High School. Keegan, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Hey, you bet. It's a pleasure to speak to you again. You and I, we got introduced to each other through the D&B Supply radio show, and now we get to have you on the Off-Farm Income Podcast. I'm thrilled about that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's jump in. I always like to start off just by asking my guests just a few questions about them, so our listeners can get to know who they're listening to. Is that all right with you?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, how old are you now, Keegan?
I'm 18 years old.
Okay. And you have been involved with the FFA for how long?
This will be year 5 or 6 for me. I joined 8th grade year when I was about 14.
Okay. So you had a middle school chapter there in Heppner.
Yes, 8th graders are allowed to join FFA.
Okay, awesome.
Heppner.
And what brought you in? Why did you want to be a member?
I kind of really followed my siblings' footsteps. Both of my older siblings, my brother and my sister, were both very involved in FFA. And they told me about it. I should get involved. And once I got involved, I just found my place. People were very welcoming. It was a very open organization, and I knew right then I would fit in.
Okay, very cool. Well, for the rest of the world out there listening, where is Heppner, Oregon?
Kind of a very desolate place in eastern Oregon. We have about 1,200 people in my town. We're about an hour west of Hermiston, and like about an hour and a half away from Pendleton, Oregon. So geographically, eastern Oregon, middle of nowhere.
All right, middle of nowhere. And I'm trying to think of a frame of reference for people. How far would you be, and what direction would you be from Portland?
I'd be about 3.5, 4 hours east of Portland.
Okay. Got it. Now, when you're home in Heppner, are you on a farm, or are you in town, or something kind of in the middle of those two?
Kind of in the middle. I don't work directly on production agriculture. My family doesn't. We have about 60 acres, which in eastern Oregon is pretty small compared to a couple of 10,000 acre places.
Yeah.
So pretty small compared to that. We have horses because my mom is a barrel racer.
Okay.
So we do some of that stuff. But other than that, my dad works for a company called NRCS, and my mom is a 4th grade school teacher. So yes, I did kind of work on a farm where I lived, but not production-wise. I had to go work for farmers and ranchers around Heppner.
Okay. All right. Very good. So did you work both in livestock and crops as you were working for folks around the area there?
Yes, absolutely. My first real job was row crops. It was wheat. I worked on this couple 1,000-acre wheat place, and we drove wheat truck to and from the field to the elevator. That was my main job. I also had to clean out grain elevators and learned a lot because my employer was very factual. Got a degree from the University of Idaho in crop science, which is a very good crop science program. So I learned a lot from him. And then working branding and a lot of other cattle drives for local ranchers. And then my biggest place that I worked production agriculture was actually my junior year. I went to Australia for the summer. I worked in Australia for about 2 months.
Oh, wow. Okay. Now, what did you do down in Australia?
I worked on a 600-acre sheep farm. They had about 700 ewes and about 100 head of cattle.
Mm-hmm.
And my main job was lambing and helping them, because over there, when it was my summer, it was their winter.
Yeah.
So I helped them with lambing.
Very cool. Good for you. So that must have been quite an experience. I'm sure that not everything they do in Australia in agriculture is identical to what we do here in the U.S.
Absolutely not. Both positively and negatively, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's good sides and bad sides to everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yep. Okay. Well, here you are. We know you're a state officer. I want to ask you about your time at the chapter level. Did you serve as an officer in your chapter?
Yes. So my freshman year, I ran for my first chapter office, and I got the one officer position that no one wants. I was a chapter secretary.
Okay.
I don't think anyone ran against or anything. And then the 2 years after that, I was a chapter president. And then I also worked as a district officer, and I was a state officer.
Okay. And what is your official title as a state officer?
The state treasurer.
State treasurer. Okay. Well, tell me about this journey. How did you become a state officer? What is, if somebody out there is listening, and they said, hey, I want to be a state officer one day too, what would you tell them?
Start networking now if you would like to, because a lot of state offices, being able to talk to people, being able to sit down and have a conversation to make a quick connection, which is what FFA has really truly taught me, being able to go out and be able to talk to people, whether that be business and industry, employers, or people that you work with on an everyday basis.
Mm-hmm.
So getting involved in those competitions, that kind of made me do that and step out of my comfort zone, really made me become more sociable.
Okay.
And really expand my leadership skills, both chapter level, and then when I became a district officer, I just really want to be more involved, because like I said, FFA has taught me more than almost anything ever has, any organization could. So I just wanted to give back in some way. And one of the best ways to do that is to serve as a state officer. So I decided to run my senior year, and luckily enough, I got it.
Okay. So you got it. Congratulations. This is you've just started your term, correct? This is like the first half of your first term. Is that right?
No, we got elected in March. So I'm about 9 months in. So at March, a state convention, a new team will get elected.
Oh, got it. Okay. So you're like 2/3 of the way through your term.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, what does the life of a state officer look like? Describe your day-to-day.
On the road, couch surfing every single day. We are on the road for about 280 days of the year as Oregon State officers. Mm-hmm. We're a very active team. We're one of the few teams in the nation that have to take a year off of college.
Okay.
So once we graduated from high school, we had a couple of trainings, so we had to take a couple weeks off high school. And then in Oregon, FFA, there's 12 districts in the state of Oregon. And each one puts on some kind of leadership camp for their members in that district.
Okay.
And as state officers, one of your main duties over the summer and kind of beginning of the school year is putting on leadership workshops at those leadership camps. So about 12 weeks, we just traveled around each different leadership camp, 1 to 2 days. And that was a lot of fun, really expanded our horizons as leaders. Mm-hmm. And then about halfway through the summer, we get about a whole month worth of training, just learning how to do classroom management, be able to talk to people, do business and industry visits, a wide variety of things. And then as soon as school starts in September, for 4 months, we're just on the road. There's about 120 chapters in Oregon. Mm-hmm. And there's 6 state officers in Oregon, and you break off into pairs. So the pairs go to each teacher in the whole state of Oregon. So for about 4 months, we just travel to every single school, and we put on workshops for that teacher at that school for a day.
Wow. So that's for each pair then, if I'm doing my math right, that's 40 schools. Yep.
We've already hit about 40 schools. We're at the last week of our leadership tour this week.
No kidding. Well, that's really interesting. Now, the state convention will be in March. They'll elect a new state officer team, but the school year will not be over. So then what do you do after the state convention?
So we will have a training to kind of like get us back to the real world, because we've been on the road so much. Mm-hmm. They're kind of going to do a training with us to say like, hey, this is what you got to look for in college. We will be basically uninvolved at the state level for about a year, because they just want us to adapt to college life.
Okay.
So during that time, we will do one event. There's CDE days, which is career development events.
Mm-hmm.
And so our team will go and help with that event. Other than that, we'll be uninvolved from FFA just so we can get back, maybe get a little money at a job or something like that. So that's what I'll be doing.
Okay. Well, now I understand you've got an international trip coming up that involves your role as a state officer.
Yes. So National FFA puts on something called International Leadership Seminar for State Officers,
Mm-hmm.
also known as ILSSO. And at this convention, it's always international trips. The last 4 years, it's been in South Africa.
Okay.
And they just decided this year to change it to Spain and Portugal. So there's about over 300 state officers in the whole nation, and only 70 of them get elected for this kind of trip that we're going on.
Okay.
So luckily enough, our whole team got selected to go to ILSSO.
Oh, very cool.
So here in December 30th and 31st, we're going to fly to New York City.
Okay.
We have about 2 days in New York City, and then about 2 whole weeks in Spain and Portugal, traveling just whole countries.
You're going to have New Year's Eve in New York City.
Yes, we will.
Are you putting on a diaper and heading down to Times Square to watch the ball drop or the apple or whatever it is?
Some teammates might, but it's not really. I for sure want to be there, but I'm not sure if I want to wait 12 hours to watch the ball drop.
Yeah,
I might be in my hotel room or something.
Okay. Well, it would be quite an experience to be there, no question about it. Pretty unbelievable. But either way, very cool. Have you been to Europe or to New York City before?
No.
Oh, wow. So you've got a big trip coming up, expanding a lot of horizons. Yeah, it's. I've been to Manhattan. It's different than Heppner.
It is probably very different from that.
Yeah, it's a little bit different. Well, that's exciting. You're going to have a lot of fun, and you're going to learn a lot, man. And then Spain and Portugal. So why Spain and Portugal?
They decided Spain and Portugal because it is very diverse in agriculture.
Okay.
We're going to do a lot of agricultural visits. Like one of the main ones we'll do is we'll go see how cork is made for like your wine bottles and everything.
Okay.
So we get to go see cork trees. I think we get to go to like some pig facility or something like that. We get to see one of the biggest horse breeders in the world. We get to go to Madrid and see how they work with metals like gold and high quality metals like that.
Okay.
And get to talk to international agricultural leaders just because it is a very, very nice country. So we get to go to Madrid, which will be very fun.
Mm-hmm.
And it also is pretty diverse in agriculture. We get to see like how olive oil is pressed and see the olives. So it's going to be pretty interesting. A lot different than what we would see here in America.
Yeah. Very cool. What kind of weather do you expect over there? Are you going to have some warmth, or is it going to feel like winter when you're in Portugal and Spain?
I think it's going to be a little colder, but not anything that you need like a lot of winter clothes or anything since it is Spain and Portugal. So, yeah, nothing too bad, but definitely not swimming suit weather, but nothing too bad.
All right. Very good. Well, that is awesome. I'm excited for you. And, man, what an opportunity you have to go and to learn internationally, to get so much leadership training and put on all these workshops. You know, I don't know where you're going to wind up in the future after college, but with everything you're doing right now, boy, you've got a lot of skills just before you even gotten started with your post-secondary education. Yeah,
it's pretty amazing experience as a state officer. Some of the doors that are opened were things that I never would have imagined.
Very cool. Well, let's go back to the beginning. Let's acknowledge your FFA advisor at Heppner. Who has that person been for you?
Her name is Beth Dickinson.
Awesome. Thank you for doing that. Always love to acknowledge our FFA advisors. And really quick, Keegan, I'm going to talk about a couple of our sponsors here on the show. Everybody, I want to talk about lacrossefootwear.com. Great new sponsor to the Off Farm Income Podcast. And we're just so very happy to have them. Matter of fact, based in Oregon now, so not too far from Keegan. And I got to tell you that they are a proud proud sponsor of the FFA. They have been annually sponsoring 15 scholarships along with 100 jackets as part of the Give the Gift of Blue program for the FFA for years now. Wonderful sponsor of the FFA. They make absolutely wonderful rubber boots and footwear. You've been hearing me talk about them. We use them here on my farm. I've been using them during hunting season. We just could not do any better. So we hope you're all putting lacrosse boots on your feet and going over to lacrossefootwear.com to check out what they've got to offer. And of course, I can't let the opportunity pass without talking about Powder River livestock handling equipment. They have just been a fantastic sponsor for several years now on the Off-Farm Income Podcast. You can find them at powderriver.com for your squeeze chutes, your panels, your runway sweep tubs, whatever you need to handle your large livestock. And never forget that they developed their equipment out here in the West with some of the craziest cattle you can ever come across. And if they have built equipment that can handle those cattle coming in off the range, well, they certainly have built equipment that can handle the cows you've got there on your farm as well. So check them out, everybody, powderriver.com. All right. Well, Keegan, I heard you laughing there, and I know you worked cows, so you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. They're pretty hard to contain sometimes.
Yeah, they certainly can be, especially if they're coming in off the range where they just barely ever see people.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about what you did during high school for your supervised agricultural experience. This is one of the things I always love to highlight on the show, and you've had a ton of success in FFA. I want to know what you were doing.
So my first ever SAE was actually a business that I raised lamb. And I'd go out and I'd find people to sell the lamb meat to. It's kind of an untraditional meat where I come from. Everyone eats a lot of cattle and beef.
Okay.
So lamb is kind of unfamiliar. So I was able to go out and be able to talk to people as an 8th grader and a freshman and try to sell my product. And that was really fun and exciting. But that was the business that my brother started when he was in high school.
Okay.
So it wasn't really personal to me. So I decided to stop that and I decided to do my own thing. And that started with working real crop over in wheat right outside of Echo, Oregon, at a very amazing ranch called Mater Rest Ranches. Worked there for a summer, and that was a lot of fun. And then the opportunity was presented to me to go to Australia, and that's when I went.
Oh, very cool. So you were able to turn that great trip, that great learning experience into an SAE as well.
Yes, because it was kind of, my advisor wasn't exactly able to supervise it, but she could FaceTime me and talk to my host family, so that was kind of cool. But it was still a great experience, and it was directly involved in agriculture. So.
Oh, very cool. Well, that is awesome. So you had a diverse array of supervised agricultural experiences, and that's really interesting. You got started with a project that your brother had begun, so it kind of introduced you into the process. But you said, "Well, this has been great. I want to do something that has just got my stamp on it, nobody else's stamp on it."
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Good for you. And so you did that working on wheat farms. And is that when you were driving the truck and taking the grain into the elevator?
Yep.
Okay. Very good. And then along came the trip to Australia and the work over there for 2 months. And so you were down there during our summer, their winter, right? Not the other way around?
Yes.
Okay. And that's when they were doing all their lambing?
Yeah. So they had about 700 ewes that were all lambing, and they divided them up to the ones that were singles, twins, and triplets.
Okay.
And that was my main job for about 2 months.
Okay. Very cool. Now, you talked about the good and the bad. What are some of the things you learned in the sheep industry in Australia that you would want to bring back and implement here in the U.S.?
One of the biggest ones is how they kept their record books. It was absolutely astonishing to me because when we use record books, it's effective. We use handbooks and we just kind of write in exactly what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
But over in Australia, it was law that they had to have everything electronically.
Okay.
Which was absolutely amazing because they would either put a chip in the cow's back or they'd put a chip inside their ear tag, and you'd just be able to scan that with this little rod, and everything that you needed to know about that cattle would come up on the computer screen. Even before it entered your property, you could see what happened to it at someone else's property to see what they did right, see what you've been doing wrong. It also helps with biosecurity measures. because you will be able to come back and see, you know what, at this point they started losing weight, so that's probably when they got that disease. And then you can go pinpoint that farm exactly where it happened. So it's pretty amazing stuff. It's a little bit more expensive, but very high technical, and pretty amazing.
Now, were those electronic record-keeping measures applied to the sheep industry as well, or just the beef industry down there?
Both.
Both. Okay. Very interesting. So it sounds to me like they must be weighing them on a regular basis if they're able to pinpoint, the beginning of some sort of a disease, a disease going on by weight loss or something like that.
Yeah. So they would have to weigh their animals every time they gave them a vaccine, just because they came into the chutes or something like that. If they needed to give a vaccine or some kind of medicine, then they would weigh them just to keep that up. And if they didn't need to, it would be a pretty regular basis. But if they could leave the animals alone, they're going to leave them alone too.
Okay. And this was actually, I guess, state law or national law down there?
Ooh, I'm not sure. I think it was national law, but don't take my word on that.
Okay. Really interesting. Really cool. Huh. Fascinating stuff. And so you did that, and then was that your final SAE the summer down in Australia?
Yeah, we could technically consider my state officer year as an SAE to help go towards my American degree, but that goes in a completely different category of SAE.
Got it. Now, what year will you be seeking your American degree?
It'll be next year.
Next year. So 2020.
2020, yeah. So I'll have enough hours with this state office that I'd easily be able to get my American degree. It's just a matter of actually filling out the record book.
Right. Very good. Well, good for you. And you've had quite an FFA experience, and here you'll be embarking on the next chapter here in just a few months, which will be finishing your time as a state officer and then focusing on college. So do you know where you're going to go to college and what you're going to study yet?
I am fairly certain I will get a master's in ag education here at Oregon State, and maybe a double major in ag sciences or animal sciences. Something that I would definitely want to be an ag teacher, but maybe something to fall back on or another profession. Got it.
Well, that's smart you've got the profession you're looking for right now, but have something to fall back on just in case something happens or you decide it's not quite what you were looking for. That's good thinking. But as of right now, you want to be back in the classroom.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And this year as a state officer has just really set that in stone. I mean, what the state officers teach and what ag teachers teach are drastically different, but the teaching styles and kind of that reward that you would get out of it is definitely the same. And I can imagine a better job, a more rewarding job than that.
Well, very cool. Do you want to stay in Oregon?
Probably. Definitely rural Oregon, maybe Eastern Oregon. I loved growing up in a small town. But
yeah. Awesome. Well, that is great, Keegan. You have done a ton. It's been a pleasure for me to speak to you on both occasions and hear even more about your story. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing it with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you to Keegan Gibbs for coming on today and sharing that information with us. And as always, enjoy your journey to the ultimate lifestyle business, agriculture.